Hello, I'm Jason Davis and welcome to One on One. With me in the studios is Kesha Isaac Adams. She's the president of the SKN Lupus Hope Foundation. We're going to be speaking about lupus and about the foundation, and we're going to be informing the public about everything about both topics. Welcome, Mrs. Isaac Adams. How are you?
Thank you, Jason. I am doing well today.
It's good to hear. Now, we're here to talk about lupus, a topic that's near and dear to your heart. But I don't think many people actually know what lupus is and how it affects people. So let's start off. Can you tell us what exactly is lupus?
Okay, so lupus at its core, at its base, is an autoimmune condition which creates inflammation in the body, and this inflammation breaks down bone and tissue, which is, oh Lord, now I'm mixing up one thing. So I have to, okay, yes. So it breaks down bone and tissue and affects the major organs. So anything from your kidneys, your heart, your skin, brain, all of it can be affected by the inflammation. It's like a soldier that has gone rogue. So your immune system, it's supposed to protect you. So if you get a cold, if you, Jason, got a cold and you have lupus, then your white blood cells, they attack the virus that causes the cold, but then it doesn't stop. So it continues by breaking down your red blood cells and other white blood cells and everything in its path. It doesn't know how to stop. So that's what ends up happening, and we have to mostly use medication to control it.
What causes lupus?
They haven't come to a consensus on the cause. So some doctors would say that there isn't a known cause at this time, as well as there isn't a known cure, but there is management, right? But there are other schools of thought that believe that because of the constant mucus buildup that we have in our bodies, they basically create a hostile environment, and this helps to break down the functionality of the immune system. But
the scientific community tends to disagree until they come to a grand consensus.
yes.
Now, back to the individual level, how can a person tell that they have lupus? What are the symptoms?
Actually, you can't necessarily tell that you have lupus. Lupus can only be diagnosed through a test, a specific blood test, but some things that end up basically prompting doctors to give you a lupus test would be constant fatigue, constant joint pain, retention of fluids in your system, especially in your low extremes, which would be like your legs, your feet. You can have certain illnesses that last too long, certain simple things. Like for me, it was a cold that just lasted too long, and that prompted them to do a search. What was the other one? I can't remember off the top of my head right now what the other one was, but yeah, you get the gist. Like those simple things can actually come along with it, but lupus is called the great mimic. So even though you might have all of these things, you might still not have lupus. You might have rheumatoid arthritis, you might have fibromyalgia, and also you can actually have lupus and still have all of these things with it. So you can have lupus and end up with lupus, you can end up with SLE and fibromyalgia, thyroid issues, other types of diseases that have zero to do with it, but because you have it, it opens the door for other diseases to just stroll on in.
So wait a minute. So if a person is going through all these symptoms, as you've mentioned, how, and it's basically the great mimic because it can look like other diseases.
Yes.
How do you determine that it's actually lupus that you have?
Like I said, a blood test, right? And doctors now are more sensitive to the issue of lupus. So instead of it being a last resort test, it actually is falling higher up on the rung of tests that they're doing. So more persons are finding out earlier, which is better for them because then they can get treatment or management of their symptoms.
Okay, so is lupus contagious?
No, it is not. I wish sometimes it was, but it is not. Because most things that are contagious, they go away. But this does not. You can't get it by sneezing or coughing on anybody, and you can't even necessarily, well, it hasn't been proven that it's genetic. So the likelihood of me passing it on to my children or like 4 of us in one family having it, they're slim. It's not impossible, they're just slim.
So, okay, it's not contagious, not necessarily genetic, so it sounds like it's just the random luck of the draw.
Yes, I know. It's unfortunate because I mean, some persons, like in my family, my cousin, one of my cousins, he was the first to be diagnosed with it, but that was long after being diagnosed with all sorts, and then his kidneys got really damaged, and we eventually lost him. But he got diagnosed, I think, the last stage, but it was too far gone for the damage to be repaired, right? And he ended up dying from like a blood clot or something. So you don't even necessarily die from this, the disease itself, but you die from something else that the disease caused to happen because it broke down your immune system or it built it up. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that your case started with a cold, meaning that you yourself are living with lupus. Okay, let's explore that for a bit. Tell me about when you first found out, or when you were first diagnosed. How did that happen, and what was going through your head?
Okay, so I was studying in university in Jamaica at UWI and Edna Manley. So I was juggling 2 schools. It was a joint degree. And I normally took my vacation in the countryside of Jamaica with a kitchen that was living there at the time, she and her husband. And while I was there during the Christmas vacation, I had a cold. And it basically lasted the entire vacation. And one day she was like, no, Kesha, this just lasting too long. I'm going to take you to the doctor, right? And then because I wasn't in Kingston, it wasn't my regular doctor. So they did all of their preliminary, urine check, your weight, all of those things. And then when they checked my urine, there's a little test that they do with the litmus paper. And it came back that I had protein in my urine. And from what I found out afterwards, from a medical friend of mine, is that protein is too big to pass through your kidneys because your kidneys act as strainers, and so protein should not pass through. So the fact that protein was passing through, it meant that something was going wrong with my kidneys. When the doctor checked my feet, she said she took her thumbs and she punched them inward and they stayed. I'd never seen that. And she was like, you're retaining water in your legs. And I didn't even notice because I wasn't in any pain outside of normal. Because I mean, I went to an art college and we were always jumping and rolling and doing all sorts of stuff. So half of the times I was in university, I was black and blue anyway, right? So I used to have to be putting on muscle rubs and stuff. So who could tell which pain was different? Plus, in growing up, I had varying health issues, and even one time I got diagnosed with junior arthritis because of the pains I used to have in my legs, especially when the place got cold. But it's not that, right? So she gave me some pills to try and flush out the water. She said, when you get back to Kingston after the 2 weeks, go and see your regular doctor, explain to her what happened, and go from there. After 2 weeks, I went. The water retention was actually worse. So she gave me another set of pills to try and get rid of the water. It still didn't work. So she sent me to the hospital, and I still had a lot of protein. Basically, the count was getting higher. So she sent me to the hospital, the university hospital, for some tests. And I think they just went straight to that. I don't know why they went straight to that, but that's what they did. They went straight to that, and I'm thankful because they caught it early enough to treat me. And even though the initial treatment was like really harsh because they treat it with steroids, and even though it was really harsh, I got to the point where my kidneys are healthy and intact. So I'm not losing protein anymore, and I'm good with that. That's always a good place to be.
Okay. Since your diagnosis, how has it impacted or affected your life?
Well, I have had a lot of struggles. I've struggled with my weight. I've struggled with my hair. I've struggled with pain. I've struggled with my mental well-being, my emotional state, all of those things. I've had a lot of struggles, like my confidence, my self-esteem. I know a lot of people look at me and they can't tell that I have any kind of esteem issues or confidence issues, but I often like have to build myself up to do things because I just don't see myself the way I used to see myself before. You know, I ended up leaving all these lovely dresses. I used to love dresses, gowns and stuff, and I ended up leaving all of them in the costume room at Edna Manley because I couldn't wear them because they couldn't fit me anymore. All my clothes couldn't fit me anymore. I had to go shopping. I couldn't wear shoes, and I loved shoes. I couldn't wear shoes anymore. My shoe size changed. My hair, I used to have like long, natural, full hair, and then my hair started coming out. The texture changed. And I was like, oh, okay, this is weird. Then I lost all the hair off of my legs. And while it's on one side, it's good, I don't have to shave anymore. It's just super weird that, you know, this thing is happening. And then outside of that, dealing with constant fatigue, it's no fun feeling that way. And then when you have to deal with society who can't actually see that there's something wrong with you because I'm not bleeding, I don't get lesions. Some persons who have lupus, they get lesions and they get the butterfly rash, which is why the butterfly is the symbol for us. And lupus actually means wolf, you know, from lupin, right? So we get a butterfly rash, but a lot of the times that is brought on if we're exposed to the sun too much, and I keep out of the sun as much as possible because it really hurts to be in the sun. But when you tell people that, they'll be like, oh, you know, you just always want to be in AC and everything. I was like, no, not really. I would like just fresh breeze, but I have to be in the shade. I can't be in the sun because it hurts, but they don't see that. So because I don't have the lesions and I don't have the rash and everything, most people can't tell that I have lupus unless I say it. They would hear me say I don't feel well or whatever, but most people don't believe that persons who look like me are actually sick. So they say things like, oh, something always wrong with you, or what happened to you now, or you wasn't just on sick leave. I was like, you want to live a normal life, but that boat basically, it don't sink like the Titanic. It's gone, you can't get it back, so you just have to make as much adjustments, and the adjustments were hard. At one point, they were really hard, but especially like when I had my daughter, when I had Alora, in the first place, I didn't think I would have children after the diagnosis and everything started happening because it threw off my hormones, it threw off my cycle, everything went haywire. And so I was like, okay, well, probably I just won't have children. And then the other thing was that I didn't want to have children and then pass on anything to them, even though they said it's not genetic, something might happen. So that was always in my head. And then when I had Alora, the pregnancy was fine. And then when I woke up, because I ended up having emergency C-section, because the cord got wrapped around her, so they ended up taking her by C-section. And when I woke up, the first thing Dr. Jacobs said to me was, Mommy, we had to do a blood transfusion because the antibodies from you basically have been attacking red blood cells. And the guilt, it just crushed me in the hospital bed, you know. I was just like, what have I done? Because she didn't ask to be here, you know. But I had to suck it up because I was in the hospital and I needed to look after her. So a lot of the times I don't even get the time to process my emotions because I have responsibilities.
I was going to ask, in fact, you mentioned that society, which we all have to deal with,
Yes.
there is no outward symptoms. You don't look like you're sick.
Yes.
And so people tend to discount what's actually going on inside. How does that make you feel? And how do you deal with that?
You know, at one point in time, it was depressing, and it's an additional layer of depression because lupus in and of itself comes with depression. It comes with depression, it comes with suicidal thoughts and tendencies. And so to hear people say what they say all the time, it used to really, really get to me. Jason, it used to really get to me. And, you know, people just, I had to get to the point where I had to change my responses. You know, I had to change how I responded and how I felt, because if I constantly allowed person's words to penetrate and get to me, then I would always be depressed, and it's not a state that I want to be in 24/7, 365. I can't. It's not healthy, and it actually feeds into the illness, and it makes it worse because stress makes it worse, and emotional stress, sometimes it's heavier than work stress or anything like that. Your emotions, because it's not something you can touch, and a lot of the times it's not something that you can easily change, it tends to attack the system worse when that's the source. So I had to sit down with myself and say to myself, look, right, you grew up with this set of beliefs. Are you going to stand on those beliefs? Yes or not? You know, not everybody believes in God, but you do. Are you going to stand on that? And I had to hold on to that to get myself out of it, because I felt like I was, you see how this tablecloth is black? I felt like I was being pulled down into the abyss of darkness. Every time somebody said something, it was just pushing me further down, and I had to say no, just stop. But one of the unfortunate things that has happened, though, is that I don't like to go out as much as before, because I don't really want people to say things to me sometimes. So when I feel some way, I stay at home a lot. You know, when people see me long after, they're like, where have you been? I'm like, here, all the time. Like, you don't walk out. It's like, not unnecessarily, especially since I can't walk during the day anyway because it's too hot. So I normally would come out at evening times, but even that I have to like force myself to do. So I actually found out, I think it was year before last, that I am an outgoing introvert.
How?
I know it sounds, it's simple. It's just that I'm an introvert in that I do prefer to be by myself, right? But I do well in social situations to a point. So once my social battery is depleted, I need to go and recharge. Yes.
Okay. Now let's talk a bit about the SKN Lupus Hope Foundation. How did it all begin?
Okay, so the vice president, Mrs. Vicky Hanley, and one of our transcended butterflies, that's what we call them, they had the idea to form the foundation, but she passed away. Ramona, oh gosh, I just asked her daughter what her last name was and I forgot again. Apologies for that. But Ramona isn't with us anymore, but Vicky and Ramona were of the mind to form this one foundation. And one day, Vicky approached me, if my memory is intact, approached me about it. And I said, sure, I wouldn't mind joining in and helping out because I've always loved helping people. I don't have any issues with that. And said, sure, I'd help. And that was my intention, to help. But then I got voluntold that I am the president. So I guess just stepped into the role, and I'm continuing with it. Yeah, and that's where we are right now.
So what does the foundation do exactly?
Okay, so we are in the baby stages of formation. We just got certified as an NGO in December. So some of the mandates are for spreading awareness and educating the public. That is the core mandate, to educate the public on lupus, what it is, what it does, and the people who are suffering with it. We are in a search for persons on the island who, well, not on the island, but in the country, because it's between us and Nevis, who actually have it. We've managed to find about 26 persons so far who are in the foundation. The foundation has in about 36 persons, but the remaining persons don't have lupus, but they either had somebody with lupus but they've passed on, or they're just persons who see the need and have joined in to help. So awareness and education is one. The other thing that we aim to do is get to a point where we can actually offer tangible help to persons, because the treatment, the management of lupus tends to be very expensive. You have to do, depending on what stage you are in, we call them stage of flares. And depending on where you are, you have to do your blood work. Some persons every 3 months, some persons every 6, some persons every month, depending, right? And those tend to get very expensive depending on which tests you have to do. And even with insurance, it still ends up being expensive for them, because outside of the test, you still have to buy your medication, and then you have to buy food differently. Yes, because a lot of persons with lupus have either had to be vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free. Some can't have soy, some can't have, well, most of us can't have alcohol any at all. But a lot of the things, some can't have greens. Yes, greens. They can't have green food.
So what's left to eat?
I know. Thankfully, not all of us are in the same category, in that whereas one person, they can't eat meat, some of us have to, because you remember what I said about having lupus and other things? Yes, those other things often impact our diet, and our diet impacts those other things. Yes, it's a cycle.
Wow, okay. So back to the foundation now. What activities have you held so far?
Okay, so we have had corporate worship at the Antioch Baptist Church, and Pastor Connor and his congregation were actually our first pledges to the foundation. So we thank them for that, of course. And then after that, we actually had a meet and greet, which was an internal meeting of persons, because even though we have the group, it's thus far been on WhatsApp, especially because of the lockdowns during COVID. So most of the persons that I've been in contact with, I've only spoken to them on the phone. I've never seen them in person. So we had the meet and greet, and persons came out, because that's the other thing, that we're supposed to be a support group for each other. So they came and we had our little kumbaya circle, and everybody got a chance to, talk about their experiences and how they feel. And, I found out that we even had one member who has been living with this since 2017, and she basically just told about 2 people recently. She had not told her family, her siblings, nobody, her job, anything, because she didn't want to be treated differently. She didn't want anybody to feel sorry for her. She didn't want anybody to worry about her. But, you know, I said to them, you know, this is the only life we have. Let people care. Let people worry about you. I mean, yes, sometimes it can be overbearing. And at that point, you know, you ask them for a little space, but still don't push away your support system, because a disease like this, we always need a strong, robust support system. It goes a long way.
And on the topic of support systems, what can a person who has a relative or a close friend with lupus, what can they do to help that person?
You know, sometimes it's as simple as being there, because sometimes we just want somebody to listen to us, so that we can get out what's going on inside. Because remember that thing I said about it coming with depression and suicidal thoughts? Sometimes it just comes out of the blue, that the void just calls for you, and it's like you're in pain, and your job doesn't understand, and your family doesn't understand, and you just feel like giving up. So it would help if there was actually one person who could just come and sit, and, like, even if you don't want to talk, they understand that you don't want to talk, but their presence is good enough, you know, for you. You could just sit down and hug them, and little things go a long way. Sometimes persons need physical help because the joints hurt and everything. So, you know, you find out from them what do you need. You need somebody to help you cook. You need somebody to help you clean, because there are times when it hurts so much that you just can't manage the house. So instead of going by them and going, your place is always dirty, you know, it would help if you just said, you know, I know you're probably not feeling well today, so let me know if you need help. Have you eaten? Do you have all the meds that you need? And sometimes you can't buy all, but if you can help with one or anything, it's just about finding out what person's needs are and at least trying to meet them halfway. It goes a long way.
Okay. Quickly, 2 last questions. What are the SKN Lupus Hopes Foundation's future plans?
Okay. Well, we have a series of fundraisers planned. And we have more awareness and educational events and projects planned. For example, I want to be able to get a space so that we can paint a mural, so that everybody passing can see it, so that it's always in, you know, the public's eye, just like cancer. We want to have memorial times for persons who have gone. You know, the cancer awareness persons, they did a really good thing in terms of having those boards around the country, and you pin your pink ribbon with the name of the person underneath. I was thinking that we could just steal that a little bit and do something similar to that. We want to do like banquets and stuff, because you not only want to make persons aware, but you want the persons in the group who actually have lupus to feel, normal or important. You want them to feel important. So one of the things I want to do is have an annual royal banquet, which would be in October, because in October, I think it is that England observes World Lupus Day. The rest of the world observes it on May 10th, right? And that's normally dubbed as Purple Day. So everybody puts on their purple in any way, shape, or form and stand in solidarity with lupus warriors. So in October, we would like to start having an annual ball called Purple Royalty to let people come and just have a good time. We want to have things always in the media. We want to have educational things on TV, videos with info, like snippets, animation snippets, all of those things. So I have like a long list of things that I would like to get off, but we have our limitations, so everything wouldn't happen in rapid succession, but hopefully they will happen.
Okay, final question. What's the one thing or the one misconception that you'd want people to that you'd want cleared up amongst people about lupus?
That we are all the same. That we are all the same. Persons hear lupus and they think that if I have lupus and you have lupus, that we have the same thing. And so therefore we can be treated with the same things. And unfortunately, that seems to be an issue among medical staff as well. And unfortunately as well, a lot of medical staff not really educated. Like the nurses and stuff, not really educated about what lupus is. We actually have a nurse in our group who said that when she found out that she had lupus, she had never heard of it and she didn't know what it was. So we always have to be doing research, but there's a difference between all of us just because of the myriad of those side things that we talked about earlier.
All right. Well, thank you very much for stopping by. This has been very informative. I know I learned a lot about lupus. Honestly, I knew very little about it before coming into this interview. And I'm sure our viewers and listeners will have learned quite a lot as well. Thank you very much for stopping by and for sharing your story and for informing us about lupus and the SKN Lupus Hope Foundation.
You are most welcome.
I've been speaking with Kesha Isaac Adams. She's the president of the SKN Lupus Hope Foundation and a lupus warrior herself. And they have a number of events being planned, particularly for this month, as it is Lupus Awareness Month. And look out for more things being planned in the future. I'm Jason Davis. This has been One on One.